Hebrews chapter 2. We looked at verses 1 through 4 last week, so we pick up at verse 5 this week. Now it was not to angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere, what is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet. Now, in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside his control. At present, we do not see everything in subjection to him, but we see him for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we lift up this morning, this church, ourselves to you as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable in your sight, not because of anything we have done or anything that we could do in and of our own power, but because of your Son and your great love that was expressed through your Son's death and resurrection for us. Yeah, Father, we love you. We praise you. I lift this church up to you this morning. I know my life. I know my ups and my downs. And if I'm a reflection of those here, I know there are some, maybe all of us, that are just struggling to keep our heads above water and just trying to figure out life as we go. Trying to be good moms and good dads, good spouses, good friends. At times we seem like we just can't do what we want to do. But we thank you for your love and your forgiveness that has wiped away all of our wrongdoing and has called us righteous. In your Son's name, amen. The great escape. All right, so what are we escaping? Hebrews 2 talks about a life of slavery. We are escaping a life that you really don't want to be stuck in, but you feel stuck. I mean, doing things that you don't want to do and not doing things that you do want to do, that you have a will and a desire, a plan for your life, and you just can't seem to get there, to fulfill these desires. So last week, we looked at this idea of just focus on the message that God has given you. Pay closer attention to what Jesus has said, because it was a message given to you, not to angels, but to you who are greater than angels. But so this week we're going to look at this idea. Who's in control? This is fascinating. It really is. I went half the week planning this sermon with the title, Jesus is in control, which he is, right? Colossians 1, Colossians 2, nothing is outside of his realm of supremacy, his authority. But what threw me for a loop, and if you're not paying very careful attention, is Hebrews 2, the author quotes Psalm 8. And if you read Hebrews 2, 5, or 6, 7, and 8, you're going to think he's talking about Jesus. And so I was studying from the perspective of this is about Jesus is in control of our lives. And halfway through the week, I stopped and remembered, wait a second, Psalm 8 isn't, namely, it's not expressly about Jesus, but about us, about you and me. And then you read in Hebrews 2, verse 9, that he brings up the name of Jesus. And so it threw me for a loop, and actually is an encouragement that you pay close attention to when you're reading the Bible, to those questions that rise in your head, and also identifying the assumptions that are coming to your mind as you're reading, that you're interpreting on the go, but you don't want to just assume interpretation all the time, because we would have lost something here. But I want to ask you a question. Why do you do the things that you do not want to do? Why do you do the things? Okay, so for example, we are all found caught in the conversation that it's a conversation about a friend. and the conversation turns negative about that friend, a friend of yours, and it starts tearing that friend down, maybe not necessarily in a harsh way, but it just starts belittling that person that you love. And within you, there's this desire to get out of the conversation. You just don't want to be a part of that. You know, it's a friend, someone you love, someone you like, and you just don't want to hear them torn apart. So you want to get out. But we've all been there where we don't get out. We actually stay put. Though there's something in us that says, man, I don't need to be a part of this conversation. This is of no value to me. It's of no value to anyone else. I need to get out. But we don't. We don't. Why not? Why don't we? Yeah, so we all have these things in life that we do that we don't want to do. Some of them are very dark secrets. Some of them are things that you do in your bedroom, you do on the computer, and every part of you doesn't want to do these things, but you end up doing them anyways. Or flip it around. There's things that you do that are things that you don't do that you want to do. There's things in life like, I don't know, loving on someone, caring for someone, stopping to help someone. You want to do it, but something in you says, just move on. I was in second grade, and an example of doing something you don't want to do. It was math class. Mrs. Jefferson is her name. I remember this day very well. It's the only day I remember in second grade because of what happened. So we're in math class, and I'm in there, and I'm sharpening my pencil with my little manual pencil sharpener, and the teacher's teaching, and I'm just zoned out. You know what, like happens to some of you on Sunday mornings, and you're just I know what goes on in your head, and I'm just sharpening, and she asks, if we have like 7 apples and 6 oranges, how many pieces of fruit do you have? And I'm thinking in my head, 13. Now, let's make this more complicated. And classmates are like 12, 14. I'm just like, whatever. And I sharpen my pencil, and I look at it. A little bit shorter than this. And the thought came to mind, could I shove this thing in my mouth sideways? Honest to God, no, this is what went on math class, second grade, the only memory of math class I have. It was probably a little bit shorter than this. Perfect. I mean, I was a guy. I was able to get that sharp tip. Perfect. And I looked at it, and it flashed across my mind, don't do what you're about to do. It's not going to turn out well. I said, man, the eraser side, sharp pointy side. And, the class is still trying to figure out, 7 apples and 6 oranges, and I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing in my mouth. And, the only way to know if it fits is to try it. And so, when you're in elementary, you just put your head down as if you're sleeping for a moment, and you just start shoving this thing in there. And I pop up, and sure as day, it fit. Barely. But this thing is, the closest picture of what I could find that would look like it. I'm there in class now, and the teacher, Greg, what is it? What's the answer? And I got this pencil stuck in my mouth, sideways. Clear the points on this side eraser. Greg, what did you do? I fit it. It worked. And so now she calls me up to the front of class. I can't get it out. It's stuck in there. It goes in a lot easier than it comes out. And she's in there trying to fish it. And this thing's about to bust through my cheek. So, look, we all do things that we know we shouldn't do. All right, that's how I tied that in there. And now, but that's just, guys, the question is why? Why do you do things that you know you shouldn't do? But this is Hebrews 2:15. Deliver all those who through fear of death, this is why, right here, were subject to lifelong slavery. You have been subjected to a life of slavery. How? Through fear of death. Now, you were born with this fear. There's nothing you can do to escape that fear in and of yourself. Now, ironically, the answer to this, and this is what we're going to bridge here over the next 30 minutes, is you have to know you're loved. That is the answer to this problem. Slavery. Just bringing up that word will probably cause the Facebook to censor this message now, just to let you know if you're looking for it. It may say unsafe for the little ears and blur it out. Just because these words are so heightened in our culture. The idea of slavery, of being enslaved. But look, what is a slave? It's a person who lost their freedom to do what they want. And you experience, now look, but here's the problem. Some of you've experienced it so long, right, doing the things that you don't want to do and not doing what you do want to do, that you actually have embraced a life of slavery as if it's normal. As if this is the way you live your life. That I have given in to not doing the things I want to do and doing the things I don't want to do, that's normal. And so this question, this idea of slavery, it actually kind of just flies over your head. You've lost that sensitivity to your bondage, your money. I mean, not doing what you want to do with your money. You want to save, you want to be charitable, but you find yourself wasting it on things that are of no value. And it's not me telling you this, you already know this. I mean, relationships. You know, God forbid you find yourself in the bed of someone else's spouse, let alone lusting or thinking after them, thinking about them. You know, your friends. Why do you find yourself tearing down your friends when they're not around? And you know you don't want to do it. There's a side of you that says, why am I doing this? I don't want any part of this. In the end, it's, you know, this world has just tweaked you to do everything you really don't want to do. Do you know what you want to do? Do you know what the desires of your heart are? Probably not. You probably have an inkling of an idea of what they are, but you don't know the depths of the riches of life as God designed it initially. The manifestation of all of this is called temptation. He is able, because he himself suffered when tempted, he's able to help he's able to help you when you're tempted. Your temptation to do what you don't want to do or not do what you do want to do is, guys, that right there is the chain that enslaves you, that keeps you enslaved to a world of corruption. Temptation. There's no better manifestation of it than the word temptation. Jesus came, he was tempted so he could deliver you from temptation. But back to verse 15 real quick. He came to deliver you through the fear of death, that you were subject to a life of slavery. By the way, it's not your fault. Slaves are taken against their will. It's not your also, it's not the fault of the person who harmed you. They're also enslaved. They're also enchained. It's not the fault of your enemy. See, so you start blaming them for the problems. You're not getting to the root of the problem. And you're not going to insert the gospel. The answer is love. We're going to get there. And the evangelism through loving like Christ, guys, will begin to break these chains in people. But if you are stuck on blaming people for their problems, your problems, whatever, you're going to miss it. You will stay enslaved in bondage to fear and to the corruption of this world. Remember that. It wasn't their fault. I know you want to blame. I know it's easier to take the burden off you and say, it's because of you, I'm experiencing this. Just in the end, no value. No value in it. What does it do? Just ask the question, what good is that? Well, okay, maybe it makes you feel a little bit better about yourself in the moment. Doesn't solve anything. It doesn't pave a new path in your road. It doesn't help them out. If anything, it burdens them all the more. So if you could find the answer as to what is really the problem here, why are you suffering at the hands of other people, and get to a point where you realize it's not their fault, You, if you haven't, that could shock you, because you could say, no, Greg, they did lie to me. They did punch me. They did steal from me. They did cheat on me. They did. You could get caught in that cycle and see that there's an element of truth to that. But what life is, it's not bound up in the flesh. So if you have the wisdom of God within you to see beyond that, you can actually begin to forgive. You can begin to release them of their sin and kill it in you, because you're seeing something a little bit greater than the problem at hand. It's not their fault. And the beauty of that then, not your fault. Oh, and then Jesus, okay, so sorry, brain's here firing off. He's on the cross, and if you go to the Old Testament, it says he bore sins as if he committed them. So in the Father's eyes, Jesus' fault. Let that sit for a second. He bore the punishment for the sins, so he had to bear the fault of those sins in order to take the fault off of you and off of mankind. He didn't just pay the punishment, but he bore the condemnation and the judgment for your sin. You see, this is the gospel, and the message is so great. This is what's inside of you, that you get to be part of the process of freeing slaves. Those who are, what is that chirp? The AC could be filling up right above your head. You get to be part of the process of setting captives free. But you have to think differently, if you don't already, through the lens of it's not gonna spill. It's not gonna spill, trust me. It'll trickle first. We, all mankind, subjected to a life brought under the control of slavery. That's our idea of subjection. Brought under the control of slavery through the fear of death. I spent some time on this last week. We're going to spend some more time on it this week. I want you to see the connection, how the fear of death brings you under the control, subject to a lifelong slavery, bring you under the control of someone you do not belong under the control of. Let's go back. Oh, yes, my mole image. I forgot about this. By the way, like I was saying, right, sometimes we just accept the fact that we're enslaved. We don't even know we accepted it. It's just life. It's just who we are. It's just what we do. We are just stuck in a system that we don't really want to be a part of. We know there's more to life, but we spend more time figuring out how to get rid of the mole underground than we do freeing ourselves from this life of slavery. You talk to any guy, and they all have a different solution to moles. Shotgun, flamethrower, garden hose. You talk to guys, there's a solution to moles. And yet the only problem they have is they just make a little ripple in the ground. And we spend more time figuring out how to get rid of moles than we do addressing the issues within. Why are we stuck in this paradigm, in this world, in this corruption of just not being able to do the things we want to do, or vice versa? So we have this tree. This is the best I can do in PowerPoint without stealing an image. Deal with it. Here's the deal. So, look, man, because I'm not an artist, worldview and belief, if I put it on the screen, it disappears. In the gray, that's what God does. All right? This is where God works. If that soil is corrupted, then it will affect the tree. So what happens is we focus on behavior a lot of times. That's what mankind does, right? There's a problem. We solve it. You did something to me, I'm blaming you for it, right? We focus on behavior. And it's of very little to no value because it doesn't fix what's causing that behavior to happen. But what upholds the behavior is our values. The values in and of themselves are not good. They're not bad. I'll actually say they're good. I mean, you have the value to have control over your life. You have the value to love. You've got a value for peace, for joy and happiness. You value life. And those values prop up our behaviors. How are we going to obtain joy? How are we going to obtain peace? How are we going to obtain love? How are we going to obtain, go through the list of values. How are we going to get there? And that's where, what you trust in will dictate how you get there. If you trust in yourself and you have the value to love, which we all do, we are created in God's image. If you trust in yourself, you will then go about doing it through your power and your means, and the behavior will be, in turn, sin. But sin is a very, very global word for everything outside of God. We will go and obtain love through our power and our measures, and oftentimes that will be corruption. It'll be through greed. It'll be through bitterness. It'll be through tearing someone else down to build ourselves up. If we trust in ourselves, or let's say we have the value of control, we have trust in ourselves, well, we may obtain control through anger. We may obtain control through physical harm towards others, through burglary, through thief, through lying. But that trust is rooted in what our beliefs are. Now, this is where your beliefs, God has to work on this. But we can feed our beliefs through what we are taught and what we hear and what we choose to trust and believe in. I use the word belief twice. Our belief, our trust, our belief, and our beliefs, our operating system, what makes us tick. So our belief system. But if our worldview, let me see what this next slide is real quick. Okay, so if our worldview, as Hebrews says, is we fear death, and you're going to have to spend some time, the next time you do something you don't want to do, just analyze it. Trace it, the origins of why you're doing this behavior, all the way back to the beginning. You're going to see it all will revolve around being terrified of dying. But if you're so used to living with this fear, it's going to be hard to see, and you're going to have to trust, not yourself, but what God is saying here. So if your belief system is rooted in a fear of death, I fear for my life because I believe that this life is the only one I have. I do not believe in God. I believe in myself. I trust in myself. So the fear of death, you see, so we're protecting our life. We don't believe in God. We believe in what we see today in this world today. Our trust is in ourselves, but we have the value to love. We have the value for peace. We have the value for self-control, but we obtain it through sin. So addressing the behaviors is of very little to no value. But if you understand what's at force behind these behaviors, and Hebrews tells you, don't look at me and say, well, how did he put that together? Hebrews 2:15. Through the fear of death, we are in bondage to a life of slavery, a life of sin, because we're trusting in ourselves. Yeah, so just to bring up the illustration from last week, so let's just say this woman's worldview is she's self-centered, her fear of losing this life, her belief, what she is taught and what she's come to see is I must control my life or it'll fall into chaos. She trusts in herself. She values control and order. Nothing wrong with those values. But she obtains it through unrighteous anger. Right? You can fill in the blank and you can trace them all back to the fear of death. Because if you don't know God, you don't believe God is true, you guys, this life is all you have. So why not protect it? It makes sense. This is why you can't even blame people who are fearing death. This is all they know life to be. And those people that you got bottled up inside of you, your heart, your mind, you just can't let go of the bitterness, try telling yourself they're stuck. I can't blame them. I can't blame them for that. They're doing only what they know in order to protect what they believe needs to be protected. They haven't learned to trust God. They don't even believe God is who he says he is. They may not even know what he says about himself. But this is the key here. And this is what Hebrews now gets to by bringing up Psalm 8. Your desire to be in control comes from God. That he made you to be in control. He made you for that purpose. to reign and rule over what he created, to have dominion over, to be his managers, his stewards of creation. Your desire to be in control is not bad. I want to let people tell you it's bad. Yeah, man, you got to let go control. Ironically, part of the answer is that. But wanting to be in control, that's indication that God has written upon your hearts. That you have been made with a purpose. But you've lost control of your control. You've been enslaved. So you are now under the control of someone else who has taken the control from you. This is what we are escaping. To begin to be restored back into our created purpose. Once again, verse 15, and deliver all those who through fear of death were brought under the control of a life of slavery. You were created to be people, men and women, that would control, would govern, would reign, and something has brought you. The fear of death has brought you under the control of that. And you can't escape death. Yeah, it does control. It does control you. Your flesh. It's going to take your flesh out. You have no control over that. But Hebrews says you don't need to fear it. Welcome it. We actually begin to take control back even over death. So now we're in verse 5. For it was not to angels that God subjected, that God brought the world under control. It wasn't to angels that he said, have dominion and reign over the plants and the birds of the sky and the fish in the sea and the animals. He wasn't to angels, of which we are speaking. It's been testified somewhere. He acts as if, well, he didn't have Psalm 8 written down. I mean, he just knew what David, that wrote Psalm 8. I mean, so he refers to Psalm 8 here. What is man that you see? But if you read this, you're not careful. You're going to just fill in Jesus, which you can, but this is talking about you. What is man that you are mindful of him? Or the son of man that you care for him? Who am I that God, you would even have thoughts about me? Who are my kids that you would even care about us? Well, you made us a little bit lower than the angels. Now, in the Psalms, it says the heavenly beings. It's the word Elohim. It's used for God or gods. But the author here says you made us just a little lower than the angels, just slightly lower. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet. Everything has been put in the hands of our control. We were designed to reign over God's created universe. His creation. We were designed to reign over his creation. It was given to us. It was Adam's design, purpose, and Eve was there to be his helper. Everything put under our feet to control. Now I'm putting everything, see, now this begins to peel back the layers here. Now I'm putting everything in subjection to him, in under his control. And he's still talking about us. He left nothing outside of his control. He's talking about us, but if you're not careful, you're just going to insert the name of Jesus and you're going to miss the glory of this. This is what you were designed to do. This was was it Romans 8? Creation groans for the revealing of the children of God because it's been subjected to a life of corruption. Creation is like, oh, please, let's get it back to the way it was. We need these men and women of God so we can be what God created us to be. Creation groans for you to get to that point where you will be redeemed, resurrected, and reigning with Christ. Creation groans to have you be the man and the woman that God created you to be. But at present, we do not see everything that's in subjection to us. To him, mankind, to us. You don't see it because you yourself have been brought under the subjection of through the fear of death in this life, in this world. You yourself are stuck under the control of something, a corrupt system. But not verse 9, but we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels. So now he brings in Jesus. So this is where I'm reminded he wasn't just talking about Jesus. Now he's talking about Jesus. But we see him for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death. He was crowned with glory and honor because of his suffering of death, through his death, so that by the grace of God, he might taste death for everyone. He still trying to wrap my head around this verse. By the grace of God, he might taste death for everyone. There's some goodness in that, but in order for Jesus to remain in control, he had to give up his control to a corrupt system in order to have victory over it, so that by grace we also. The way it's worded seems to express that you can also suffer through death. But Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ. Have you? Well, yes. I mean, my fleshly body's been united to his death. It's as good as dead. It will one day run out. Maybe today, maybe the time will run out, maybe in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I don't know. It's as good as dead. It's not taking anything with it. I've considered myself crucified with him. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Be crucified with him means he must have been crucified himself. But we're too busy being afraid of death than considering ourselves already dead. This is what has to happen. There's no other way to put it. If this doesn't happen, you stay stuck. If this doesn't happen, you will be enslaved till the day you die. And you will not know life as God created it. You don't even probably, well, I don't want to make that too generic, but some of you may not even know what that life should even look like. You feel like, man, the struggle you're in right now is not too bad. Let's just accept it. But what you trust in has to change. It has to change. And some of you don't even know it. It's so instinctive, you trust in only yourself. You trust only in what you see. And you'll never escape the bondage of sin. If you only trust in yourself, and you can't really just sit here and identify it. Well, maybe some of you can. Some of you might be on the fringe because God has brought so much affliction upon your life. You've been broken down. You've got nowhere else to go. But some of you, you're instinctively only trusting in yourself. You are still afraid of death. You are living in fear. And that has to change. It has to change. Because trusting in yourself will only produce fruits of the flesh. There's no wonder why Galatians 5, fruits of the flesh, come right before the fruit of the Spirit. Those are the two worlds, the two natures we have to live by. But how do you change your trust? If everything in gray is what God does in your life, he's the one who instills that initial belief, that faith. He's the one who accomplishes or has victory over death and wipes away the fear of death. I mean, how do you sit here? Just real quick, think about it. How do you sit here and just flip the switch? All right, I'm going to trust in God. I mean, how do you do that? We're talking about impossibilities right now. We're talking about things that if you accomplish and you do, you are witnessing the power of Christ in you. So if you're able to trust in God, then you have the power of God at work in you. And that right there is a testimony to who you really are. So let's just first identify the fact that even trusting in the Lord takes the strength of the Lord in you to do this. But you're going to have to let go of your fear of death. You're going to have to let go of your fear of death, the fear of death that you do not even know you're living by. How do you let go of that? I mean, some of you, you're probably not even putting it all together yet. How is my fear of death causing me to be stuck in my addiction? Well, because you're so far removed from it. It's hard to identify. But you have to let go of your fear of death. How do we do that? We ultimately, that trust has to change. If it changes, God is at work in you, and the fruit begins to change. We begin to escape. Let's just ask this question. What would happen to you if you knew you had no control? What would happen to you if you knew you had absolutely no control over your life? Ironically, He created you for the purpose of control and dominion, and yet even Adam couldn't control his own life. Colossians 1, Jesus held him together. What would you do if you came to know and you believed, you absolutely believed that you had no control over your life? Because here's the reality. You can't make it rain. You cannot make the skies open up. Well, according to some, if we run our SUVs long enough, maybe we can prevent the rains or cause them. You can't make it rain. You have no power to command the sun to rise tomorrow. These things are required for your existence today. You can't call the sun up and call it down. You have no power over a rogue cell in your body that's going to create havoc and misery for the rest of your living life. You have no power over what the cells in your body do and if one is to go rogue or not. You have no guarantee that on the way home, the cars driving next to you will not choose or decide, or the people in those cars decide, take them out. You have no power, no control over what the others are doing around you. So, if you begin to break down your way of thinking and put yourself in a vulnerable place, which you really are, you cannot add another second to your day or take another second away. You are vulnerable to this entire world and are protected by God's hand and His hand alone. If you can come to that point, then maybe you can begin to divert the energy that you spend trying to save your life and protect your life to knowing that you are loved. There's a leap there. I didn't put to trusting God to knowing that you are loved. Like I said, you really can't just flip a switch and say, I'm going to trust God today. You really, mentally, I guess you could go through that exercise. It's not going to be of much value. But if you can begin to say and begin to know that I am loved even in those storms where you don't even know if you're going to make it out, your trust will begin to turn. You will trust those who you know love you. It's an instinctive reaction to love. Children that know that they are loved trust their parents. If you know God loves you, you will begin to trust him. And the added benefit, the fear of death begins to melt away. 1 John 4. We have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. Where we're starting, right? Where we're ending this, I guess. You come to know and believe and to trust in that love that God has for you. You get yourself, you spend your energy, forget being angry. That anger hasn't done anything for you. It's offered no help in the end. Just let go of that. Take that energy that you're putting into anger and just say, okay, look, I am going to spend some time working on knowing that God loves me. I'm going to pick up the Bible and read 1 John chapter 4. You know something? Okay, my finances are a wreck. I'm going to stop wasting my energy worrying and being anxious over my finances and begin to trust the one who can open up the storehouses of heaven for my family's sake. Or you can choose to continue fearing death and continue trying to work this all out on your own and feel like you're on a treadmill. But we have come to know and believe the love that God has for us. God is love. Whoever abides in love, whoever takes up refuge in his love, whoever places their home, their house, they're living in this love lives in God and God lives in him. Verse 17, by this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment. Because as he is, so also are we in this world. As God is, so also are you in this world. When he's perfected this love in you by living in him, abiding in him, believing in his love, knowing his love, he's perfecting his love and you become like him in this world. There's no fear in love. But perfect love casts out fear. There's no more fear of death when you are drowning in the love of God. All death is a doorway into our real life and our real home. For fear has to do with punishment. Fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. So you break this all down, you look at that tree and you see that you're still hanging on to your anger and you're still hanging on to your trust in yourself and your lie and your greeds and all these fruits of the flesh. You are proving to yourself you still fear death. And ironically, Hebrews 2 verse 2, every transgression or disobedience received its punishment. It's been taken care of. So the great message that Hebrews 2, the great escape, is an escape out of the bondage of corruption into the arms of love. And so when our trust, when our worldview is we know, we believe we are loved by God, and our beliefs are rooted in that, we will begin to trust in God. Those values that are not wrong in and of themselves, of control, of peace, they begin to bear fruit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. We can't manifest that. We can't fake those fruits. We have to escape a life of slavery, a life of fear. Next week, we're going to talk about, Hebrews goes on, it says, he's not ashamed of you because you still have these memories of everything you've done. They may still haunt you. But next week, we're going to look at that. He's not ashamed to call you his child, which is something that would prevent you from coming to know his love. All those deeds that you have done, everything that you have done can be the final barrier of coming to know the love of a father. He's not embarrassed by you. And he's definitely not ashamed to call you his son or his daughter. So who's in control? Well, ironically, you were designed to be in control over all of creation. But for a time being, we have to let go of all of it to the one that we know is in control. He'll restore us all back to the way we were designed. A day where there will be no stress and there will be no anxiety, no depression, no sadness, where death is truly swallowed up, so therefore no fear of death will ever exist again. But for now, come to know and to believe that you are loved by God. Heavenly Father,